this series is part of my Buddhist art course at this institute. And so every Tuesdays we're having a talk, mostly online, but we have some on campus and online too that will be offered starting from next week with Andy Carr talking about his new book. And the series will lead to a conference again, talking about the connection is Buddhist texts, Buddhist philosophy, the creativity of the mind, and the artistic practices. And so people are welcome to apply for this conference, do a proposal. Olaf will put the call for paper, upload it. The deadline is for tomorrow, but we can extend it a little bit if you tell me that you're interested in submitting a proposal. We'll make some exceptions. So please, today, now, we will welcome Arawana Hayashi, kind of heads the creation of social presencing theater for the Presencing Institute, working with Otto Scharmer and colleagues around in the arts, meditation, and social justice, to creating social presencing that makes visible both current reality and abilities for individuals and groups. Arawana, as a choreographer, a performer, an educator, is deeply sourced in collaborative improvisation. Her dance career ranges from directing a street dance company formed by the Boston Mayor's Office for Cultural Affairs, the 1968 murder of Dr. Luther King, to being one of the court dance. In the US, she has been the co-director of the dance program at the Naropa University, Boulder, Colorado, and a founder director of 2 contemporary dance companies in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Welcome, Arawana. We're so happy accepted to come to this series of talks. So I will leave it to you now.
Thank you so much, Dan. I appreciate the invitation very much. And I'm very grateful that all of you have been able to join. And I'm oftentimes in these groups because my work now, current work, is largely about what we call a social field, or cultivating relationship fields, with the sense that it is the health of the social field that actually is the ground for collective innovation, collective creativity, and collective compassionate action in the world. And that we have so many challenges now, social inequities and environmental challenges, that we know that just individual people and individual meditators, although this is very good for strengthening ourselves and clarifying our own mind and heart, in order to affect change, perhaps it is good to think of the collective creativity and the collective wisdom. So I'm going to ask you that if there's any possibility of keeping your camera on, we have more of a feeling that we're co-creating a social field, that I'm I'm very interested in how learning and art making are co-created. In other words, it's not me, the speaker, and I'm supposed to be sort of delivering something to you who are just like a sponge or something, but that we all together create whatever we're going to do here in our little bit of time together. So the invitation is always that if you can leave your camera on, then I get a feel for, and we each get a feel for our, what we call social field or our social body. And when we look at one another, those of us that can see each other, we can actually get a feeling for each other. Like, it's not like we don't, even though we don't know one another, right? We have a sense of each other, right? Just by looking at our faces or our upper body, we say, oh yeah, I don't know those people, but I have a feeling for them. I have a feeling of what humanity is just by looking at you. I can feel, we can feel each other's goodness, basic goodness. We can feel each other's presence, right? Currently, I work for something called the Presencing Institute. It doesn't really have a location, although the founder, who is Otto Scharmer, and maybe that's vaguely familiar to some of you, that name, but perhaps not. He's teaches at MIT, at Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So there's a slight connection, although the institutes are separate. And it's not a Buddhist organization by any means. There are Buddhists like myself, but there are many other people. But there's an interest in how recognizing each other's good-heartedness, what we call the basic goodness or the Buddha nature of each person, is a very high priority to recognize that in each other. And also to recognize that every being is creative, that living is a creative process, and that collectively, we all co-create social reality. We create this world that we live in. Of course, there are power dynamics that also, control that process to some extent, but all of us are artists in that way. And this was the teaching of my own guru, who is Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And that name, again, may or may not be familiar. But Rinpoche came to the United States in 1970 and taught largely in the West, in the US and Europe. And he wrote many books and is highly influential in terms of bringing the Buddha Dharma, and particularly sort of the nine yana, the Tibetan tradition, not only in in the Buddhist tradition, but also the kind of cultural, some of the cultural rituals of Central Asia, and sense of, mostly the sense of how important it is today to be courageous and confident. in our own goodness and in the goodness of others, right? And that takes some inner strength, some what he called like lungta, some presence. So this is why I really enjoy seeing everyone's presence, not only because of this current connection of the Presencing Institute, which basically is a made-up word that means presence, to be present, and to use one's sense perceptions, and to trust one's sense perceptions, and to trust them more, possibly, than what we think. So our work is oftentimes letting thoughts come and go, but actually working with what it is we see, what it is we hear, and specifically in my work, what is embodied, what is felt in the body. So as Diane said, my background is in dance. I was trained since I was a child. But I often, much of my life was about making things up with other people. And sometimes these were children, sometimes these are school teachers, sometimes these are actual professional people in the theater. Oftentimes very interdisciplinary with poets and visual artists and musicians. And many of us worked together for many years, all of us being students of Trungpa Rinpoche, because he was very interested in the arts. And one of his definitions of Dharma art was simply non-aggression. Non-aggression, which all of us, I'm certain, are quite familiar with with the teachings of the Buddha on a sense of non-manipulating. It's not about fixing and changing and forcing, but it's an appreciation of things as they are. And particularly appreciation for our perceptual world. That we're so appreciative of just being able to see one another, of just being able to spend a little time together. We're appreciative to be able to hear and share some thoughts, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts. So I'd like to start with this sense of just what it is. We could take a few moments and just practice in a way that is open-minded, open-hearted, and non-aggressive. So if I could ask you just to put your feet on the ground, if you can, and just sit up for a moment. I'm sure that this is familiar with your work there at the university, this blending of practice and study. So I'd like to just do a little bit of basic let's say mindfulness awareness practice, but basic just what it is to be a human being right now, this morning. It's human being practice. And I'm going to ask you to particularly emphasize the sense of the body embodiment. So if you could please feel your feet on the ground, if you can. And your seat, like where you're sitting, so that you're resting your attention on this lower body, and particularly the connection to the good earth body. That there you are in Nepal or various places where you are. Here I am in New York. But every single being on this planet has a place right now on the planet. Every person, every animal, And some of those places are full of sorrow and conflict, places of war, places of this terrible earthquake. Places of drought. But each of us has a place here in a relatively peaceful spot. And we can feel our connection and our spot and our place on the planet right now. And we can feel that through our body. And we feel our back, the strength of the back. We feel the top of our head. It's always in some conversation with the sky and with open space. And we feel our heart, both its appreciation and joyfulness, delight, as well as its sorrows and confusions and angers. Both our vulnerable, soft, and open heart, as well as our troubled heart at times. We just appreciate everything. So if we could just sit like this for just a minute or two, with the emphasis on the feeling of the body, letting our mindfulness attention rest on the feeling of the body, can be the feeling of the body breathing. But it's just a moment in which we're emphasizing the sense of groundedness and the connection of our body and the good earth body, just for a few minutes. Thank you. So one of the things about sitting still is this practice of non-aggression, of not trying, but just being present. And that is the basis then for, in my work, gesture. But it could be for word, it could be for a brushstroke with ink or paint. But in my case, it has to do with, in all of us, because we live in bodies, it has to do with how we move around in the world, how much our physical presence affects our environment. It affects other people. And we say when there's a joining, right, of the mind and the body, let's say, it's like this. Here's my pen that I'm using. So here's a mind and here's a body. And oftentimes this mind is thinking, right, about yesterday or about tomorrow, or it's making some opinion or judgment or assumption about our current situation. And the body just goes on, it's cooking or it's walking outside or it's doing something, but these two are not connected, right? And of course, as we know, basic mindfulness means that we bring the attention back onto the, let's say, it could, if we're using the body or the breathing as an object for mindfulness, it comes like this, right? And we're saying that this synchronized mind and body then allows for an open awareness, right? When this is all, this is thinking and this is doing something else, they're also disconnected from their context. They don't actually feel other people. They don't feel this blue sky or these birds or this sound of traffic. They don't actually feel. So the synchronization allows this sense of feeling. And the word in English, this word that we use, it's certainly in English, we use this word aesthetic. Aesthetic, and oftentimes people think it means beauty, and the translation is beauty or artful. But the actual word means feeling. That an anesthetic is what the dentist, gives you when they, or the surgery, they give you an anesthetic, which makes the body numb. But aesthetic, appreciating, the feeling, it means that we have more and more feeling about what we experience, what we see. We have more feeling about what other people say. There's a resonance. And if we're disconnected, the mind and the body, experience just bounces off of us like, boop, I see something, I hear something, but it doesn't touch me. But this approach to art making, Dharma art, is very touching. It actually resonates in our bones, what we see, what we hear in our everyday life. And so when Trungpa Rinpoche talked about art in everyday life, he was talking about gestures and words that come out of this, what we might call a meditative space, a space of open-mindedness and open-heartedness. It comes out of a kind of gentleness, and that gentleness is very powerful in the world today. So in our work, we practice these gestures. We say, like currently I'm doing this kind of work where we might say, I have a conflict in my life, let's say, a challenge. And what we call this a stuck place. We just call it stuck. And it means that we're trying to create something move something forward in our life, but there's an obstacle, a force. But in a sense of systems thinking, or let's say interdependency, no one is stuck by themselves. There's forces, there's systemic forces that allow, that hold us, from making changes, from opening up, from actually moving forward. Right? So in our work now, we would say, okay, my stuck right today, it feels like, maybe it feels like pressed down, right, like this, or maybe I feel I'm too stretched in different directions, or I have conflicting loyalties somehow, something pulling here, something pulling here, whatever. We embody the sort of felt sense of something, right? We embody that. We say, okay, I'm not going to pretend that that isn't happening. I'm actually going to try to get a sense of it. It's not acting or psychodrama, or which I'm sure is interesting, but that's not what this is. This is talking about forces that are keeping me from moving forward, right? And I'm stuck somewhere. I might be stuck like in this shape, or I might be stuck in, in this kind of shape. Like my body's here, but I'm looking here. That would be a kind of, I feel like I'm twisted somehow, and I'm not really moving forward in my life. I'm not moving toward openness. So then we would ask, like, what does it feel like to be stuck? Now, does the body want to stay there? No. Remember that we're talking about a viewpoint of Dharma, which is that there's always opening, there's always kindness and compassion, there's always wisdom in every being. And this is who we are, right? And yet there's many fears and habits and, all the habitual pattern that makes us close down, right? So that's okay. Every human is afraid, right? Every human has a closeness. But our training in the Dharma is to notice that and then to try to open, to try to extend some loving kindness, appreciation, compassion towards ourselves and other people, right? This is the teachings of the Buddha. So if we can actually embody something that feels stuck, we notice that the body itself, if I don't think about the story, I don't think, oh, this happened, I should have done that, oh, he shouldn't have said that, oh, if we don't go through the whole story, but just a feeling, right? Then if we stay with the body's feeling, the body doesn't want to stay like this. Right? It's not a sustainable thing. Stuck is not sustainable. And so we let the body move to what it would like to do. Right? We don't know what it is. This is the open part of it. We don't know what the body really will do, but it does something, right? Then we end up in what we call our second sculpture. From sculpture 1, we do something, whatever it is, and it ends up in sculpture 2, let's say. And then we let the sculpture say a word, or a phrase. So we're trying to tap into the body's wisdom. That's what our work is about. And this requires, a sense of real commitment to being embodied. So when I first met Trungpa Rinpoche, but that was 1974, a few years after that, he asked me to study Japanese court dance, which is called bugaku. My heritage is Japanese, although I was born during the Second War, so in the US, so I don't speak Japanese. And I don't have much connection because of the war and whatever, we did, my father didn't have much, didn't maintain any real connection culturally. So, and Trungpa Rinpoche was very interested in people's like ancestors, that we stayed in touch with our cultural roots. And, as Americans, many people don't have much sense of their cultural roots, but this is probably not true for most of the world and maybe many of you. Anyways, so I studied this very kind of slow, very, very slow, formal dancing. And I'd been, a contemporary dancer and an improviser. But what I learned from doing this was how important just a sense of the gesture arising from space, from openness. So I started with this sense of non-aggression, right? Non-aggression. And how non-aggression can be kind of be a part of one's everyday life. Non-aggression doesn't mean just, oh, I'm not angry, right? I mean, probably we know this. Non-aggression means not trying to always fix and change and intervene and adjust and manipulate, right? And many of us as meditators, we're always trying to sort of fix our mind. And certainly I work in what's called change work. So, it means that on an organizational or institutional or teams, so it's you want healthy teams, you want healthy organizations and families. So there's always this wanting to help, wanting to contribute, wanting to be of benefit. And yet there's also this sense that in our everyday life, it might be good to, first of all, just really be with whatever is, with the stuck places, with the difficulty, just to be there. And then there's a natural unfolding towards healthiness, towards the basic goodness. So all of us, whether we're teachers or leaders or are trying to facilitate change in one way or the other, scholars, our job is is the container, or what are the enabling conditions for this goodness and openness to show up. And one of the ways that we have been doing this is by accessing the wisdom of the body in our work. So the bugaku, the Japanese court dance, has a huge emphasis on space, on just nothing happening. And the movement comes out of this very open sense of possibility. And I began to call this kind of gesture the true move. So it was sort of my way of describing what I had learned from Trungpa Rinpoche, from Buddhist practice, from art making with others in the same, who are studying with the same teacher and in the same environment, much of it at Naropa University, which Diane mentioned before. It became, how do we just tune into the natural creativity that's happening? Whether it's within our art form, in my case, dance, could be other art forms, or whether it's our everyday life. But practicing within the formal art form for me has been like a bridge between formal meditation practice and life, how to be a good family person, a good grandmother, or a good team member at my organization, or a good, example or teacher for others. Like the art making has been the bridge there. So it's the opposite of kind of making art for art's sake, although art is always for art's sake on some level. But it's creativity and art making that is a practice of experiencing and expressing isn't the right word, but of uncovering basic goodness in myself and in others, basic openness. And it includes, to some extent, all of our blind spots and the ways that we make ourselves and other people suffer. But it's faithful to, let's say, it's loyal to the sense of the goodness of all beings and the possibility that we could actually engage in such a way that creates a better world for my grandchildren and their grandchildren. Because the situation that we're in now is so difficult, with systems just falling apart, and then the behaviors associated with that in terms of denial and blame and violence and destruction. All of the behaviors associated with people trying to hold on and protect themselves when they're clearly systems are completely falling apart, institutions, families. So I'm so appreciative of all of you studying the Dharma and studying and practicing your own in your own traditions, and not only for resilience and strength and developing our own sense of equanimity and compassion and courage, but also because each of you, are leaders in some way within your own context. Each of you have your own networks and spheres of influence. And so I feel that you're in a very privileged position to be studying this way and able to contribute in the world that we live in. Maybe just to finish this, so the trajectory of my life was really studying in a formal way dance, Western dance, improvising, making stuff up. And it's kind of, I was young in the 1970s, where making things up and being more disruptive was part of being alive at that time and young. And then meeting Trungpa Rinpoche and really from that time on, trying to bring this sense of how does one express the Dharma, not in religious art, like in artifacts of statues of the Buddha and whatnot, tonkas and that kind of, or monastic dancing, or any of the number of things that could be more formally within the tradition. But how does one bring the sense of Dharma art into everyday life? This sense of non-aggression and appreciation and kind of something coming from nothing, from open space of compassion. And so today I'm very privileged, and it's auspicious coincidence and a great blessing to be able to work in an institute, which isn't, as I said, it's not a Buddhist institution, but the principles of collective possibility and collective innovation based upon kindness and based upon enormous faith in human beings and the capacity for human beings to create a good society. Trungpa Rinpoche's book, which is called Shambhala, The Sacred Path of the Warrior. He wrote many books, but that's the one that's one of the most well-known and certainly most influential for me. It's called Shambhala, The Sacred Path of the Warrior. And Shambhala describes a good society. That's a word, right, from the Central Asian word that described an enlightened society. And the basic teaching was in Shambhala is that this society is possible, but it requires our own bravery, that we can step beyond our own comfort zones and our own doubts and fears in order to really help out in this world. And he was a great believer that art could really help out this world, non-aggressive and powerful expression. So I think that's what I wanted to share with you today, and I would be grateful if I could hear some of your thoughts on what you're thinking about and interested in for the next few minutes here. Appreciate that you're listening.
Thank you so much for this sharing, kind of bringing us in a state of, I'll speak for myself, a genuineness with myself, at least in these groups. So this is really good. And I sense that when working both with practice or with people in general, and with art also, that it's very difficult to learn to come back to this space of genuineness before I'm a step ahead of myself often. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to bring me back to the place where I could start from. And maybe I could start from my classes that way, or whatever I'm doing my day. So I thank you very much for that.
We actually do this in Presencing Institute. There's always a moment in the beginning of meetings in which we don't do anything, and it's often because many of us are just on one call after another on Zoom, right? So it can be very disembodied Zoom. So we need to say, this is my body, this is my space where I am now. And I'm joined by these friends for a little bit of time. And as you say, Diane, just this is a perfect situation for being a human being, a genuine human being. We take that attitude. Oh, I think there's something in the chat here. Excuse me. Oh, somebody put the book in. Thank you very much. I don't know whether it's accessible where you are. It's published by the Presencing Institute, so it doesn't have much distribution. But and I don't like using Amazon, but it's possible. And so the book does go through the practices that we do. There are 8 practices, and it also does tell a little bit more about the time with Trungpa Rinpoche and some of the practices that we did with him. He was very interested in art, and he himself was a calligrapher and flower arranger and was trained in Tibetan monastic dance. So the question is, maybe this question about bringing bravery, how does this practice bring bravery, is connected with what Adyan said about genuineness. That bravery or confidence is really feeling whatever we feel, which could be fear, right? I mean, oftentimes is kind of restlessness, anxiety, fearfulness. And we're definitely not talking about getting rid of that. We're saying that that is genuinely what's happening. And that's a perfectly good thing. It's possible to step forward or to speak or to not speak from our own genuineness. But bravery comes from being in touch, right? In touch with oneself and in touch with one's context. That we feel, what is this situation? What is this? What is going on here? What is the feeling quality of this social situation, this family gathering, this team meeting? You know, what is the feeling quality of this institution? Those of us that work in companies, right? They have a feel. This classroom, it has a feeling quality. And I don't mean emotion, right? I'm not talking about emotions, although that's part of it. If you're working with like Buddha family energy, but I'm just saying that the sense of connection is what makes it possible to step out, even if we don't know exactly what's going on, which is true most of the time, right? It allows us to speak or not speak or move forward or stay back, whatever is the appropriate gesture, because it's in genuine communication with the context. And that's a quality of being brave enough. In a funny way, it's like being brave enough to actually feel, to pay attention and to feel. Because much of feeling is uncomfortable. But we are not, if you're interested in the Dharma, you're definitely not interested in comfort. That's not the that's not the value base, right? Or if you're doing change work, you're in the wrong line of business if you're looking for comfort. But what we are looking for is genuineness, as Diane said, as feeling this interdependent connection with all beings. And the practice is to stretch out our capacity so that it's Valentine's Day, right? So that we love not only just a few people around us, our friends and family, but that can stretch out to those that we don't know and those that we actually don't like. It can expand out. So bravery is just taking that step. Taking that step to be really connected, really engaged in a genuine way. So I think that's the connection there, as far as I can tell from the, you know, that the practices, right, whether it's visual art or in my case, movement, is continually practicing on. I notice, right, when it's held back, when it's conceptual, when it's just coming from my own idea of what I think living is about. It doesn't have anything to do with the others in the room. And in my case, it's oftentimes, I'm working, so it's called social presencing theater. Social means that it's other people. There are practices for one's own groundedness and embodiment, but it really is about how I'm in relationship with one other or groups of people. And the word theater, the work is called social presencing theater. Theater means that the root of the word theater means a place to behold something. That's what the word means. In fact, the root of theater is the same root as theory. It makes something visible. So theater, in this case, is not acting like the theater, but it's about us. We're visible. That's why I asked you to put the screen on, the camera on, because I can see you. And so this sense of seeing gives a feeling quality. So in our case, if you're referring to social presencing theater as an art form, and certainly informed by the Dharma, then it creates a kind of natural, we're not saying that bravery is something that we don't have. We all have it. We all have this unconditional confidence. And it comes from noticing it, right? Just because I'm a human being sitting here today on this good earth, under this sky with you, that's enough. I don't need a different life, right? Right now, this is the life. And I can be completely confident in that for no reason. It doesn't matter whether you like or don't like, or whether you think this is interesting or not interesting, or whether you want to be here or don't want to be here. It doesn't make any difference. But at this very moment, here we are. And we can feel that in the body, right? The body knows. I want to thank you very much for that question, or for your attention, and Diane for the invitation. I know that our time is over now, and I'm really grateful that you took the time to join in, and yeah, I appreciate it very much, and I wish you a very good wishes for your studies, and really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arawana. Thank you so much. I'm hoping one day I can go to the institute, the Presencing Institute, and take a workshop with you.
Diane, we don't have any space. It's all everywhere, right? We don't actually have a building. There's no institute. The address of the institute is Otto's office, which is about the size of my desk here. It's tiny. That's the address. It moves locally to where it's needed, and mostly now we work for the UN for trying to implement sustainable development goals on the country level. So it moves around wherever we are, and much of it is free and online, right? That's one of its offerings, is that it offers free training in the change theory online. So, but we would love to see you anyways, in any location.
Great. So maybe if you can share with me, even by email, if you show me some link.
Oh, I will.
So we
I
can
should put that in. It's uschool.org. I'm going to put that in right now before I go.
Thank you, Arawana.
Oh, I can't do this without my glasses. Yeah, it's uschool.org, and it's
Okay.
yeah. So please take a look if it's of interest. It has a lot of offerings that are free of charge.
Great. So
Thank you
I'm
so
sure
much.
I'm sure I will attend something or other.
Well, it would be
See the
lovely.
work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.